right, there we go. So today, as we prepare to kick off this season of Advent, this season where we are going to sing about peace on earth, we're going to sing about joy to the world. There are over 6 wars, or there are currently 6 wars going on around the world, and each of them are responsible for over 10,000 deaths. There are currently 15 wars going on that have caused somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 deaths. There are 20 going on that have caused somewhere between 100 and 1,000 deaths. And there are 15 skirmishes that have caused somewhere between 10 and 100 deaths in the last year. These are numbers for 2023, 24. And so when added up, the most conservative numbers tell us that last year, 77,150 image-bearing souls, at the least, created by God, carefully knit together and given life, were lost to conflicts among nations, leaders, cultures, and kingdoms. A more realistic number sits much higher than that, somewhere at least 100,000 people. And of course, none of those wars going on are happening here in America. Very few, if any of us, have been directly impacted by these wars. And while the number of souls lost is concerning, perhaps more concerning is the fact that we just don't seem to care a whole lot. Now, we're willing to acknowledge that these wars are going on. We know about the war between Russia and Ukraine, and we're sad for that. And we can be concerned about Israel and Hezbollah and read into the conflict with these biblical implications. But let's face it, if we're honest, isn't it just more concerning to us that our Amazon packages are arriving on time this time of year? And whether our president-elect is going to save or end America? You see, we just don't think about these things. They're not in our backyard. The Civil War in Sudan, which has caused around 150,000 lives lost in the last couple of years, or the ongoing drug wars in Mexico and Colombia, which are among the biggest in terms of loss of life, estimated at over 400,000 lives lost since 2006. They just don't land on our radar every day. And I'm not telling you this to try to stir up some emotion of guilt or some emotion at all. I'm really just saying this to remind you that governments and kingdoms on this earth are run by spirits, and these spirits are bent on death and destruction. They raise up weak men by giving them faux power. They think they have power, but they don't. And they put them into place to cause destruction. And these spirits are singularly focused on keeping God's creation from returning to Eden and being in the presence of God. And they are highly effective. And they're not simply spirits that existed in the past. They exist today, they are at work, and they're highly successful. And it would be easy to assume, as we often do, that because we aren't actually directly at war in our country, that we are blessed. Our country isn't being run by these spirits that have a goal of prolonging the suffering of the world. But I actually do think that we are at war, and that our war is every bit as dangerous. But our war is far more subtle. You see, false gods always take. They take, and they take, and they take. They make promises to their people to deliver on these promises, and they do it just enough to keep their followers coming back for more. And in order to get more, the followers give a little more. Eventually, those followers are sacrificing their families and their children. Eventually, they're sacrificing their own life. In Russia and Ukraine, there's an entire generation of young people being sacrificed for the promises of their leaders. In Israel, the promise of land and democracy is demanding the lives of kids, splitting families, and forcing murder and violence. And it's tempting to think then that since we obviously aren't doing those things, that we're blessed, that we're better, and I think that our plight is just as dangerous. Many of us are actually sacrificing our families and our kids to dangerous spirits. But perhaps it's just a little more difficult to point out. We too are handing ourselves over to kingdoms and governments, false promises, deceit and lies, and the death toll of our wars are uncountable. There are many different kingdoms that we serve today. Just a couple of them. There's this kingdom of individualism, which promises personal liberty, the ability to make a name for yourself, comfort free of judgment, autonomy, privacy, ultimately the ability to create your own truth, your own type of life. And we have handed over our entire existence to this government, to this kingdom, and the spirit that rules over it. We believe that our faith is our own, that it's a personal endeavor. We believe it's a private matter that doesn't need to be shared. You have your faith, I have mine. Let's leave it at that. And then there's the kingdom of consumerism. The kingdom of consumerism promises comfort, wealth, happiness. As soon as something stops delivering to us the things we want, we move on. We sacrifice our children to this. We raise them up as the greatest participants in this kingdom. We patronize one thing until it stops pleasing us, then we move on to something else. We're satisfied for a little while until we aren't, and then we move on. We might pick a church based on how great its children's program is. After all, if our kids aren't being entertained well enough while they learn about Jesus, we could always go down to the street to the next church because it has a slide and a ball pit in their nursery. And churches are dying because they still play the organ when everyone knows that drums and guitars are way cooler. Now, as you know, I love drums and guitars. I play drums and guitars. And they can be in church. I'm a champion of updating our children's ministry and coming up with engaging colors and ways to communicate the gospel. These things are not bad in and of themselves. But I do wonder that if slides and ball pits and exciting stage designs and beautiful lights and good music and comfortable chairs and high-quality live stream, if they've established themselves as a necessity to our ability to worship and people's ability to engage with the church. I think they sometimes really do. And it's a danger that we have to guard against when living in this established kingdom of consumerism. The church and the leaders within it often feed this consumer spirit. We can often plan and organize our existence by what we think people will buy into. What will get people to give? What will get people to attend? So we come up with strategies that are less about the good news of Jesus and more about keeping families happy and feeling fed. The bulk of church music today isn't built for collective singing, and the sermons and messages delivered from the pulpit are often dripping with life advice and application, with very little proclamation that God is good and he loves us. We've stopped relying on the gospel to transform lives, and we've taken it upon ourselves to be the arbiters of transformation. And in turn, people who have practiced this rhythm of giving and participating only in what they are directly receiving from, they give and they participate in whichever church is